Before we begin, what would you do if the galaxy's deadliest predator chose to guard a single human instead of tearing him apart? Leave your answer in the comments and don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss our next HFY sci-fi story. The chamber of the Galactic Council was carved from black stone older than the stars. Its domed ceiling shimmered with starlight, not natural, but projected from systems spread across 1,000 conquered worlds. Beneath that glow, the representatives of the elder races gathered, each shrouded in their own grandeur, scaled lords from the Dracothi, crystalline minds from the Ari, insectoid warbrokers of the vein. Their voices blended in a dissonant hum of tension, a chorus of arrogance wrapped in fear. At the center of the chamber, a single name echoed over and over. The Predator. It was no myth. Not anymore. For centuries, its existence had been debated in whispers, a nightmare spoken of in half-truths. But now entire frontier colonies lay abandoned, their populations erased with no sign of battle, no trace of survivors, no explanation except claw marks that shredded alloys meant to withstand warships. The Predator was not a rumor. It was a storm in the flesh. The Ari speaker's voice chimed like breaking glass. Entire hunting parties lost. Armored leviathans slain. Even our war beasts refused to step on the same soil. This creature cannot be allowed to live. The vain warbroker clicked her mandibles, her tone oozing with disdain. Then send hunters. Not council words. Our guilds are paid to bleed, not to talk. Agreement rippled through the chamber, though it carried the weight of unease. No one said aloud what they all understood. The Predator had already shredded through the galaxy's finest. Still, the council's pride demanded action. From the back rows, where the youngest species were forced to sit like unruly children, a human voice cut through. And if your hunters fail again? Heads turned sharply. Dozens of eyes, crystalline, compound, and scaled, fixed on the speaker. He was tall for his kind, though in this chamber that meant nothing. His dark hair was cropped short, his posture that of a soldier who had lived too long on the frontier. Lieutenant Marcus Hale wore no gilded robes, no ceremonial armor. His uniform was plain human military issue, the crest of Earth barely visible on his chest. The Ari speaker's voice rang sharp. Lieutenant Hale, your presence here is tolerated, not welcomed. Humanity has yet to contribute meaningfully to this council. This matter is not yours. Hale's jaw tightened. He did not flinch under the gaze of beings older than his species' first fire. With respect, it is mine. I've been stationed on Vera 9 for 6 months. The Predator's hunting ground runs through my patrol routes. I've seen what it leaves behind. Murmurs rippled, but the council dismissed him with waves of jeweled appendages. Humanity was young, fragile, and untested in their eyes. They would not take a human scout's word over the fear etched into their history. The Dracothi warlord rose, scaled wings flexing. His voice rumbled like volcanic stone. We send hunters. Not diplomats. Not theorists. Hunters. And with that the vote was cast. Across the chamber, light from 1,000 worlds flickered to affirm. The hunters would go. The Predator would fall. No one asked what would happen if it didn't. After the chamber emptied, Hale lingered in the shadows. His fists clenched at his sides, not in fear but frustration. He had studied the Predator's trails, marked its patterns, seen where it chose to strike and where it chose to simply watch. It wasn't mindless. It wasn't random. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, it had spared him. He remembered the night in the forests of Vera 9, when the trees had fallen silent. His squad had thought it was a blessing, a chance to rest. He had been the only one to notice that the silence wasn't peace, it was a warning. That night, the Predator had taken his squad apart in seconds, yet left him alive. He could still hear the screams. He could still see the blood. Since then he'd walked the frontier with the sense of being followed. Watch. Judge. Now the council had sent hunters to finish what none before had managed. Hale knew what awaited them because he had seen the aftermath. And though they dismissed him, he would not sit idle while arrogance drove them to slaughter. He left the chamber and keyed his communicator. Static hissed, then resolved into the voice of Captain Darren Cade, his old commanding officer, gruff and iron-willed. You heard? Cade asked. They voted, Hale replied. They always vote. Don't mean a damn thing. What are you thinking, Lieutenant? Hale hesitated. To follow meant disobedience. To disobey meant exile from service. But to do nothing meant the hunters would die blind as his squad had. I'm thinking, Hale said quietly, that if they send hunters into Vera 9, someone who understands the ground better than they do ought to be there. Someone who knows what they're walking into. Cade grunted. And that someone is you. You don't have orders. Since when did that ever stop us? The line went quiet. Then finally, you've always been reckless. You've always been right. Do it. Hale ended the call and checked his rifle. The weapon felt small, almost laughable compared to the stories of the predator. But he didn't need to kill it. He just needed to understand it. To survive it. In orbit above Vera 9, ships from half a dozen species already burned through the skies, hunters armed with every kind of weapon known across the stars. Their arrogance would carry them down to the forests where the trees grew thicker than city towers, where the air itself seemed to wait for blood. Hale boarded a smaller shuttle, silent and unmarked. As the engines roared, he glanced once at the stars, then down at the green world beneath. Somewhere down there, in the shadowed woods, the predator waited. And though the council believed it a beast, Hale knew better. It wasn't just a predator. It was watching. Choosing. He tightened the strap on his pack and muttered to himself, "Let's see why you spared me." The shuttle pierced the atmosphere in a streak of fire, vanishing into the endless canopy below. The hunt had begun. The shuttle dropped Hale into the forest like a stone vanishing into a sea of green. The canopy swallowed sound and light, muffling the thunder of engines until only the creak of branches and the whisper of wind remained. He crouched, rifle raised, and let the silence settle. Out here, silence wasn't calm, it was a warning. The forest held its breath because something else was breathing with it. Across the horizon, other craft descended, their landing thrusters scorching the ground, their hunters pouring out in gleaming armor. Hale glimpsed their beacons through the trees, alien glyphs flashing red and gold, marking the arrogance of species that thought technology louder than instinct. They moved in squads, armed with plasma rifles, toxin nets, and seismic sensors that pulsed through the soil. They looked efficient. They looked unstoppable. Hale knew they weren't. He kept to the shadows, moving with the ease of long practice. His boots left almost no trace on the moss. Every step was a calculation, every pause a survival choice. The memory of his squad haunted him. Their boots too heavy, their laughter too loud, the sudden silence when the predator had chosen them. He adjusted his pace. He would not make their mistakes. Through his visor he studied the alien hunters. A Dracothi war leader barked orders in guttural growls, his wings folded tight against heavy armor. A vain huntress scuttled across tree trunks, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. Smaller races, sharp-eyed and swift-fingered, deployed drones into the canopy. They were predators in their own right, seasoned killers from a dozen battlefronts. But they weren't ready for this world. Hale could see it in the way they trampled foliage, the way they lit torches in a place that punished light. They were tourists in a killing ground. Hours passed. The hunters spread out, their confidence growing as no attack came. They joked, hissed, or boasted in their native tongues. Hale followed from a distance, marking their positions on his map, noting where their arrogance left gaps. He wasn't here to save them, but he needed to understand how the predator would strike. The first signs came as always, subtle. A shredded trunk, sap bleeding from deep claw marks. A carcass of a beast 3 times Hale's size, split open as if peeled by invisible blades. He ran his hand over the grooves. Cling. Precise. Not frenzy. Deliberate. He felt the eyes before he saw the shadow. Branches shifted, weight pressing where no wind blew. Something massive was above him. He didn't lift his rifle. He didn't move at all. His breath slowed, heartbeat a drum too loud in his chest. Then the branches released. The shadow slipped deeper into the forest. It hadn't struck. It had simply reminded him it was there. A scream tore the silence. Plasma fire followed, bright against the darkness. Hale sprinted toward the sound, weaving between roots, leaping fallen logs. When he reached the clearing, 2 alien hunters lay broken, their armor bent inward as if crushed by a giant's hand. Another staggered, missing an arm, his shrieks echoing until a blur swept through and ended him with merciful swiftness. The remaining hunters unleashed everything they had: plasma bolts, energy nets, sonic disruptors. The forest itself seemed to convulse with light and thunder. But Hale didn't see the predator fall. He saw the streak of its movement, impossibly fast, weaving through attacks, ripping weapons away as if plucking flowers. The Dracothi war leader swung his blade, only to have it ripped from his hands and flung into the trees. The vain huntress leapt, but a claw struck her midair, sending her crashing into the dirt, lifeless. Then silence again. The predator was gone, the clearing left with carnage and fear. Survivors clutched their wounds, cursing, trembling. They had expected a beast. What they faced was strategy. Hale crouched at the tree line unseen. His instinct screamed to retreat, but his mind burned with clarity. The predator had killed with purpose. It had dismantled the strongest, the boldest, leaving others alive but broken. And once again it hadn't touched him. He checked his surroundings. No tracks pointed toward him. Yet he felt it, an attention heavier than any weight. He knew it was watching. He could almost sense it in the rhythm of the forest, a predator not just feeding but choosing. As night fell, the hunters regrouped, shaken. Fires lit the canopy, their flames flickering against armor slick with blood. They spoke of revenge, of new traps, but beneath their words Hale heard it, the fracture of fear. They had lost more in 1 hour than most armies in a war. And the predator had not even tried. Hale made camp far from their noise. His fire was small, shielded by stones, his meal no more than ration strips softened with water. Yet when he glanced up, his heart lurched. At the edge of the light, a carcass lay fresh, a four-legged beast killed cleanly and dragged here. He hadn't brought it. He hadn't killed it. The predator had. He stared at the offering, hand tightening on his rifle. Could mean threat. Could mean test. But something in the way the carcass was placed, close but not in the firelight, spoke differently. He whispered under his breath, "Why me?" The forest gave no answer. He didn't sleep much that night. Every crack of wood, every shift of leaves pressed him toward the trigger of his weapon. But morning came, and with it the sight of another carcass, smaller this time, left closer. His breath caught. This wasn't intimidation. This was pattern. This was intent. He rose, scanning the trees. No shadow moved, but he knew it was there. Watching. Deciding. By midday the hunters set another ambush. They lined a ravine with seismic charges, drawing bait into the kill zone. Hale watched from above, unseen. When the ground thundered, the hunters cheered, convinced they had ended it. But from the smoke emerged the predator, unscathed, eyes burning through the haze. It did not roar. It did not charge blindly. It stepped forward with the patience of inevitability. The hunters broke before it reached them. Panic spread faster than fire. Some fled into the trees. Others dropped weapons and begged their gods. The Dracothi war leader stood his ground, only to be torn in half by emotion too fast to follow. Hale didn't cheer. He didn't mourn. He only whispered, "You're not killing me. You're waiting for something." As the sun dipped below the canopy, painting the forest in blood-red light, Hale realized the truth. This wasn't a hunt. Not anymore. The predator was not playing with prey. It was choosing. And for reasons Hale could not yet understand, he was at the center of that choice. The forest had learned to breathe with him. Days blurred into one another, marked not by hours but by hunts and silences. Hale moved carefully, rifle always in reach, senses sharpened to a razor's edge. The alien hunters dwindled, their arrogance cut down until their camps burned low and their voices fell to whispers. The predator had become more than a threat to them, it was inevitability. Hale knew their fear, but what unnerved him was different. He was still alive. Not untouched. His body carried bruises, cuts, and the ache of exhaustion, but spared. Always spared. He had seen the predator close enough to feel the air ripple with its movement, to see its silhouette blot out the stars. Yet the claws that shredded armored warriors had never turned against him. Instead it lingered. It followed. It offered. He was beginning to feel less like prey and more like something else, something it had marked. It came without warning one dusk, stepping into the clearing as if the forest itself made way for it. Hale froze, his body tight, rifle raised, every instinct screaming to fire. But the weapon felt small, childish against the enormity of the creature before him. It stood taller than 3 men, its frame corded with muscle beneath hide that seemed more armor than flesh. Scars etched its body in jagged patterns, living testimony of battles survived. Its eyes glowed faintly amber, not with rage but with thought. The predator didn't rush. It didn't attack. It simply stood, its massive head tilting slightly, watching him. The silence was unbearable. Hale felt his heartbeat hammering in his chest, his mouth dry, his mind torn between fight and flight. Yet something held him rooted. He remembered the carcasses it had left near his fire. The tracks that had followed his own. The way it had killed every alien hunter who strayed near him, but never once aimed for his throat. Slowly, as though every second might break the fragile balance, Hale lowered his rifle. The predator moved as well, not forward but down. With deliberate grace, it crouched, lowering its massive body until its gaze was level with his. It was an impossible gesture, a thing of nightmares bowing like a sentinel before him. The air crackled with the weight of what was happening. Hale's throat tightened. "You could kill me," he whispered. Why haven't you? The predator did not answer in words. Instead, it shifted its stance, placing one clawed hand on the ground between them. There, etched faintly into the hide of its wrist, was a scar. Not random. Not recent. A human mark. Memory surged like lightning. Years ago, in a different sector, Hale had found a wounded cub in the underbrush. His squad had wanted to finish it, terrified by what it might become. But Hale had stopped them. The cub had been bleeding out, its flank torn open by traps. Hale had cleaned the wound, stitched the flesh with his field kit, and left it alive. It had been no more than instinct, a soldier refusing to let something suffer needlessly. He hadn't thought of it since. Until now. The scar was his handiwork. The cub had lived. And grown. The realization struck with terrifying clarity. The predator remembered. And it had chosen. From the trees, survivors of the hunt watched in horror. One cried out, a shrill alien tone that cracked the fragile stillness. Plasma bolts erupted, streaking toward Hale. Before he could react, the predator surged upright with a roar that split the canopy. Its body became a wall of muscle and claws, intercepting the fire, shielding him. It struck back with a violence so swift the hunters never stood a chance. Limbs tore. Armor shattered. In seconds the clearing was slick with blood, the air heavy with smoke and iron. Hale hadn't moved. He stared, frozen, as the predator loomed over him again. Not threatening, not victorious, protective. It had slaughtered the hunters not as prey but as trespassers. He swallowed hard, forcing words through his dry throat. You're guarding me. The predator's eyes glowed brighter as if in answer. The remaining aliens broke, fleeing into the shadows, their courage shattered beyond repair. Their voices carried panic back into the forest, their shouts filled with words like abomination and impossible. They had seen enough to know what this meant. Hale stood there, rifle loose in his grip, staring into the gaze of a creature that could end him in less than a breath but refused to. In that moment, the central conflict of his life shifted. He was no longer just a survivor of his squad's massacre. He was the man chosen by the galaxy's deadliest predator. The forest seemed to pulse with the revelation. Every rustle of leaves, every call of distant beasts felt like part of something larger, a truth threading itself together. This was no accident. The predator wasn't sparing him out of whim. It was memory. It was bond. But Hale also knew what came next. The hunters would not stop. The council would not believe. And when they learned what had happened here, when they realized the predator guarded a human, the galaxy itself would convulse in fear. The predator stood close now, its shadow enveloping him, its breathing a low thunder in the quiet. Hale exhaled slowly, his decision made. He could not run. He could not hide. Whatever this bond was, it would drag him into the heart of the storm. He whispered to himself, voice low, words meant only for him. Then we faced them together. The predator inclined its head as though it understood. Above the trees, distant engines roared. More hunters were coming, guided by desperation and pride. The forest was not done bleeding, and neither was Hale. The bond was sealed. The survivors limped back into the light of the council chamber as though dragging ghosts behind them. Their armor was shredded, their banners broken, their bodies marked with wounds both visible and invisible. They had set out as hunters, confident in their legacy, certain of their weapons. They returned as remnants, their faces shadowed by fear no one dared name. The chamber erupted the moment they appeared. Voices overlapped in a thunderous storm, accusations, disbelief, demands for explanation. The RE speaker's crystalline body shivered with fury, its tones sharp enough to cut stone. You were armed with the finest of our technology. You outnumbered it 10-1. How do you stand here defeated? The Dracothi survivor, scales dulled by ash and dried blood, dropped to one knee. His words came low and broken. It was not a beast. It was not prey. It chose its battlefield. It dismantled us piece by piece. And he faltered, his throat tight. It guarded him. The chamber stilled. The word echoed like a weapon discharged. The vain huntress, her mandibles cracked, added her voice. We saw it with our own eyes. The predator shielded the human. It bled for him. It killed for him. We struck it both, and it spared only him. Gasps spread through the council like wildfire. Eyes shifted toward the back rows where Hale now stood, his uniform tattered, his presence no longer that of an overlooked scout. He did not stride forward in triumph, nor shrink back in fear. He walked to the center with deliberate calm, each step heavy with meaning. Behind him, the chamber doors shook with a deep vibration. Guards raised weapons, tension spiking. Then the doors opened as though pushed by an unseen force, and the predator entered. Its massive frame filled the threshold, eyes glowing dimly against the dark of its hide. Its claws scraped faintly against the stone, a sound like thunder at a distance. The guards held their weapons tight but did not fire. Every being in that chamber understood, without needing words, that their weapons would not matter. The predator did not advance with rage. It did not roar. Instead, it crossed the chamber with a slow, deliberate gait and came to a halt beside Hale. Then, to the shock of every delegate, it lowered itself to one knee, head bowed, its shadow stretching long over the human. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the translators held their tongues. Hale's voice broke it, steady, carrying across the chamber. I didn't tame it. I didn't command it. Years ago I saved a cub from a trap. Remembered? It grew. And when you sent hunters to kill it, it chose me. The Ari speaker's body flickered with disbelief. Impossible. No predator binds itself to prey. Hale's gaze was unwavering. Then perhaps you've never understood what prey really is. On Earth we lived alongside wolves, lions, beasts larger and stronger than us. We didn't dominate them with strength. We survived beside them with respect. Some of them became our allies. Some became our companions. Perhaps what you call impossible is only something you've never seen. The chamber erupted again, but now the tones were fractured. Some shouted for exile, declaring humanity a danger to the balance of power. Others whispered of prophecy, of ancient warnings that a species would rise to walk beside predators. The vain war broker hissed, if humans can command the loyalty of such creatures, then they will be unstoppable. They must be controlled. Or eradicated. Hale did not flinch. You can try. But I don't control it. And I don't think you'll find a way to kill it if it doesn't want to be killed. The predator shifted, its massive frame tensing as though to punctuate his words. The sight alone silenced half the chamber. The Dracothi warlord snarled, torn between awe and fear. This bond threatens us all. You've brought ruin into our council, human. Hale stepped forward, his tone sharpened like steel. No. You brought ruin when you assumed the galaxy bent only to your fear. The predator has been here long before you, long before us. It chose. And it chose a human. That's your problem now. Not mine. The words cut deeper than any blade. The council, in all its arrogance, had never imagined being defied so plainly by a voice from a species so young. Yet here it stood, a human with the galaxy's deadliest predator kneeling at his side, and no one dared move against him. For a long moment, the chamber was nothing but silence, broken only by the low breath of the predator. Every delegate weighed what they saw against everything they thought they knew. The balance of the galaxy had shifted, and the axis of that shift was a soldier from Earth. Finally, the Ari speaker whispered, its voice trembling despite its crystalline body. If this bond spreads, if predators align with humans, nothing will remain beyond their reach. Hale's eyes swept across the chamber. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He only said, then you had better decide whether to fear us or work with us. Because either way we aren't leaving. The predator rose to its full height, its shadow engulfing him entirely. The sight was enough to freeze every voice that might have spoken against him. The council session ended in chaos, delegates storming out to rally allies or draft decrees. Some whispered of purging Earth, others of alliances to secure humanity's favor. Fear had shifted to calculation and calculation to desperation. Hale left the chamber not as a scout, not as a soldier, but as the man who stood beside the unthinkable. The predator followed silently, its steps a constant reminder that the galaxy's rules had changed forever. Outside, the corridors echoed with whispers. Guards pressed themselves to the walls, unwilling to meet the eyes of the beast at Hale's side. News was already spreading faster than light could travel. Entire civilizations would hear of what had occurred before the next sunrise. And Hale knew the hunters had not been the last. There would be more. Armies, assassins, politicians, zealots. They would all come, driven by fear, greed, or prophecy. Some would try to destroy him. Others would try to own him. But none would ignore him. As he reached the docking bay, Hale glanced once at the predator. Its amber eyes watched him with the same unshakable focus they always had. He felt a strange calm in its presence, a certainty stronger than any shield. They'll come for us, Hale murmured. The predator's breath rumbled low, almost like an answer. He lifted his rifle and checked the chamber, a ritual as natural as breathing. Then let them. The galaxy's storm had only just begun. The docking bay reeked of ozone and machine oil, the hum of departing vessels filling the air with a restless tension. Hale stood at the threshold, rifle in hand, the predator looming at his side like a shadow carved out of living steel. For a moment the soldier closed his eyes, centering himself. He was no diplomat, no chosen emissary, no messiah. He was just a man who had once pulled a wounded cub from a trap, and somehow that act had set the galaxy on fire. The sound of boots on steel broke his focus. A squad of armored guards surged into the bay, weapons trained, faces hidden behind mirrored visors. Their commander, a broad-shouldered Dracothi, barked the order to stand down, but the command lacked conviction. Every eye in the room flicked nervously toward the predator. It made no move, only stood at Hale's shoulder, its amber eyes locked on the soldiers as though measuring their intent. "You've disrupted the order of the council," the commander said, voice harsh but cracking beneath the strain. "You and that thing are to be detained until further judgment." Hale's grip tightened on his rifle, but he didn't lift it. "You can try," he said evenly, "but I don't think any of you really want to find out what happens when you do." The predator rumbled low in its chest, a sound like grinding stone. The soldiers stiffened, weapons trembling ever so slightly in their hands. Fear was not new to them, but this kind of fear, primal, marrow-deep, was something none of them were trained for. The standoff stretched until one of the guards faltered, shifting his weapon an inch too close. That was all it took. The predator moved with blinding speed, covering the distance before the soldier could breathe. One massive claw stopped inches from the guard's visor, frozen in deliberate restraint. The message was clear. It could have killed him, but it chose not to. Hale stepped forward, voice carrying over the silence. "You see it now. It's not a beast chained to me. It's a partner. It chooses to stand here. You think you can cage choice? You think you can bind loyalty?" He shook his head slowly. "No cell, no council decree will change what's already been decided." The commander's jaw tightened. He lowered his weapon first, then gestured for his squad to stand down. The relief was visible in the way they backed away, giving Hale and the predator space. The bay doors groaned open, exposing the star-strewn void beyond. But Hale didn't step through. He turned, aware that the real battle wasn't with soldiers or guards, it was with the council itself. Already whispers carried through the corridors. Assassination orders, decrees of exile, calls for extermination. They wouldn't let him walk away untouched. And he was right. The first shot came from above. A glint of metal in the rafters, the sharp hiss of plasma splitting the air. The assassin had been waiting. Hale dove sideways, the bolt searing past where his chest had been a heartbeat earlier. The predator roared, the sound shaking the docking bay like thunder, and leapt. Its claws tore through the support beams, bringing the sniper crashing down in a tangle of steel and sparks. The assassin struggled, blade drawn, but the predator pinned him with one massive paw. Hale rose to his feet, rifle aimed squarely at the assassin's exposed throat. His breath came hard, but his aim never wavered. "Who sent you?" Hale demanded. The assassin's lips curled in defiance. "The council fears what you are becoming. Better to end it now than let the galaxy burn." Hale's finger hovered on the trigger, but the predator's growl made him pause. Slowly he lowered the rifle. The beast pressed harder, the assassin choking beneath its weight. And then, at Hale's faint nod, it stepped back, letting the assassin live but broken. "Tell them what you saw," Hale said. His voice was iron, calm but deadly. "Tell them you had the chance to kill me and I spared you. Let them wonder why." The assassin staggered away, clutching shattered ribs, vanishing into the corridors like a wounded animal. Hale turned back toward the starfield beyond the docking bay. His heart hammered in his chest, but clarity sharpened his thoughts. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that there was no undoing this. The predator at his side had made him a symbol. To some, that symbol was salvation. To others, a threat that could never be tolerated. Either way, he was no longer just Hale. He was the fulcrum on which the galaxy would turn. The predator stepped closer, lowering its massive head until its eyes met his. For a fleeting second, Hale felt the bond between them not as myth or accident, but as something profoundly real, trust earned in blood and fire, a connection that defied every law of survival the galaxy thought it understood. He looked out into the void, the weight of countless civilizations pressing against him, and found his resolve. "We won't run," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll make them see." The predator's rumble was low, approving, like distant thunder promising a storm. Behind them, alarms blared as word spread that the council had declared emergency session. Hale knew what that meant. Votes for war, for extermination, for alliances fractured and reforged in the shadow of fear. Every species with something to lose would now be calculating how to gain by striking first. But he also knew something they did not. The galaxy's most feared predator had chosen its place, and it wasn't with them. It was with him. With humanity. He tightened the strap of his rifle, his silhouette outlined by the stars. The predator's bulk loomed beside him, a living reminder of everything the council could not control. Together they stepped into the waiting shuttle, engines roaring to life. As the vessel lifted from the docking bay, the council chamber behind them erupted in chaos, its great edifice cracking under the weight of panic. Civilizations teetered on the edge of war, leaders scrambling to rewrite laws and histories in the face of an alliance they could neither comprehend nor stop. And Hale, once a forgotten scout, now carried the burden of their fear on his shoulders. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply braced himself because he knew the next move would not come from him, it would come from those too terrified to let him exist. As the stars stretched into streaks of light, the predator shifted, its massive frame settling with a kind of weary vigilance. Hale leaned back in his seat, rifle resting across his knees, and let the silence fill the space between them. The war had not yet begun, but the first shot had already been fired. And when the galaxy came for him as he knew it would, they would not find prey waiting in the dark. They would find a man and a monster. And they would learn the difference.